Reporting on the North Korean nuclear threat. Sanger says the regime is getting closer to being able to launch a nuclear weapon that could reach American shores, and now the U.S. is resorting to cyber attacks to try and undermine the North Korean missile program. Sanger also reported on the U.S. cyber attack on Iran's nuclear program with the computer worm known as Stuxnet. That's described in his book, Confront and Conceal: Obama's Secret Wars and Surprising Use of American Power. David Sanger has written for the New York Times for 30 years and has worked on 2 teams that won Pulitzer Prizes. He spoke with Fresh Air's Dave Davies.
David Sanger, welcome back to Fresh Air. North Korea's nuclear program has been a serious security concern for a long time for the United States. You write that 3 years ago, the Obama administration ordered the Pentagon to step up cyber and electronic strikes against North Korea's missile program. What are we talking about?
Well, Dave, thanks for having me back on. And what we're talking about here is a new way to think about defeating or delaying the possibility of an attack by a rogue state like North Korea. A new way because if you think about our traditional missile defenses, it has been since the Eisenhower era an effort to go build what people call a system in which a bullet can hit a bullet. Somebody shoots a missile, we shoot something up in the air, try to intercept it. In its most glorious version, this was the Star Wars plans of Ronald Reagan. In their more day-to-day plebeian uses, this is what the Israelis do with Iron Dome, which intercepts short-range missiles, and what the United States has attempted over the years. The U.S., since Eisenhower, has spent $300 billion trying to develop these kinds of systems. And the early tests on this have not been reassuring. Under perfect conditions, where the Pentagon knows that a missile is about to be launched and roughly where it's going to appear, we have a failure rate of about 56%. And that's intercepting long-range missiles. A higher success rate against short-range missiles. And so the question that President Obama faced was, if you've got a rogue state like North Korea coming along developing an ICBM, can you rely on this system to defend the United States? And I think it seemed pretty obvious to him that the answer to that was no, and he needed another layer, another approach, and left of launch, defeating these missiles before they're launched, was that approach.
Well, what's striking to me about this, and when I read this in your piece, I think a lot of us thought, North Korea with nuclear weapons is a scary thing for a lot of people, but surely if they tried to attack the United States, a missile would have to cross the Pacific Ocean. We'd see it coming. There would be plenty of time to react. In fact, it's a very real threat, isn't it?
It is a real threat. Now, so far, the good news is the North Koreans have not developed a missile that can make it across the Pacific, or at least they haven't tested a missile that can make it across the Pacific. And, developing an intercontinental ballistic missile is no easy task. It took us years in the 50s and took the Soviets years in the 50s to do it because the missile goes out of the atmosphere and then has to re-enter, and there are huge stresses on it, and there are huge problems in developing accuracy. But most of the best estimates are the North Koreans will be there in the next couple of years, 3, 4, 5 years. Now, people said that 5 years ago as well, but they have so stepped up their testing capability that there's good reason to think they will reach that milestone. And then the question is, do we have an effective means beyond the traditional missile defense to go stymie that? And that's the problem that President Obama was dealing with in secret in early 2014.
Okay, and so, apart from the anti-ballistic missile system trying to knock it out of the sky, they developed these cyber and electronic means. How does this work?
Well, the way this works is that you try to defeat the missile before it launches or in its early moments of launch. And so this is part of a program the Pentagon has been pushing somewhat in the open. A lot of the documents for this we found in the open describing the technology, even though it didn't refer, except in a few specific cases, to North Korea. But a lot of these methods, they've been trying under the rubric of left of launch. if you think of left of boom, the phrase you heard so often in Afghanistan and Iraq, which was how do you defeat an IED before it explodes? Find it and disable it. Left of launch is the same concept. How do you defeat a missile before or right during the launch? And the idea is to get in using a cyber weapon to get into the missile systems, whether it's a guidance system, a computer system, a system that communicates the sort of headquarters to the missiles, so that you can interfere with that and keep them from ever launching it, or if it does launch, send it off into the water in its opening moments.
Is there evidence that it's been effective?
Well, there is certainly circumstantial evidence that it has been effective. The program that President Obama approved in early 2014, which I think you could say, and we can come back to this later on, is sort of a follow-on to a different kind of cyber program he approved in the early days of his presidency to use against Iran's nuclear program. But this program was really aimed at the intermediate range missiles, something called the Musadan missile, that the North Koreans were testing on their way to making an ICBM. And the origin of this story, Dave, in many ways, the origin of our writing about it, was that my colleague Bill Broad, with whom I've worked since the Space Shuttle Challenger investigations back in 1986, he and I were sitting discussing the North Korean launches one day, and we were looking at this string of failures. Remember all the times you'd pick up the paper and you'd read, North Korea tries to launch a missile and it fails.
Right.
And we looked at the numbers and we realized that the failure rate on the Musadan was 88%. Now, this for a country that hired a lot of former Soviet scientists after the Berlin Wall fell and after the Soviet Union dissolved, brought them to Pyongyang, bought a lot of their technology, and in their early days had very high success rates with the North Korean missile program because they were basing it on experiences that the Soviets and later Russia had. And suddenly their failure rate soared. Now, the problem we ran into, Dave, in the course of the interviewing for this and the course of our other research, is that for any given launch, it's very hard to say what went wrong. Could have been electronic interference, cyber interference by the United States, but it could have been bad welds, bad parts, bad luck. And the North Koreans have had a mix of all of those. And it's easy to forget that if you go on YouTube and you look up early U.S. missile launches,
right,
we dropped a lot of missiles into the drink as well.
Right. Is this kind of cyber effort, how is it alike or unlike the Stuxnet worm that was used to disrupt the Iranian nuclear program?
Well, it's a good question, and the commonality here, Dave, is that you're using cyber means or electronic means, and sometimes there's a distinction between those two, to accomplish a result in the real world. So in the early days of cyber, we thought it was just sort of computer-on-computer battles. I go after your computer system, you go after mine, maybe I go after your bank account that's linked to a computer system. But in the Iran case, we had the first case in which the United States, in a secret program codenamed Olympic Games, went after a physical system, in that case an enrichment plant underground at Natanz in Iran. And the purpose of the cyber attack was to sabotage the plant in a way that previously you could only do by bombing it from the air or maybe sending in saboteurs on the ground. In this case, what they did in the Iran case was that they got into the computer systems and forced the centrifuges, which are these giant machines that spin at supersonic speeds to enrich uranium, forced them to speed up or slow down until they exploded. And that worked for about a year and a half. Eventually, the code leaked out. Nobody's fault, but it got out, and the Iranians got a copy of it, and they figured out how to go defeat it. And I worked between 2010 and 2012 on a book called Confront and Conceal that included and opened actually with the scene of President Obama discovering that this code had gotten out and that this program on which they had spent millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, had become known to the Iranians, the Chinese, the Russians, and others, and they had to decide whether to suspend it. The North Korea program is in many ways more difficult because in the Iran case, you were going after a fixed plant underground. If it didn't work today, you could work on the code and come back next week. In the North Korea case, you have to go after missiles, and you have just seconds to be successful at that moment of launch.
So you're somehow acquiring, discerning software codes that would affect the missile and then sending a signal, from a satellite that disrupts it?
There are all kinds of ways that you can send it, and I'm not being coy with you. As we worked on this story, we understood its sensitivity and deep classification, and in the course of conversations we had at very senior levels of the U.S. government, people were obviously concerned with it, we agreed to keep out of the story the how that they are going about this in an effort not to help the North Koreans figure out how to defeat it. On the other hand, we thought it was very important to describe, as we did in the Iran case, what the U.S. is doing, because there's a huge, important, roiling debate that the government has kept pretty well suppressed about how we use these cyber weapons, because we are, of course, the most vulnerable country on earth to cyber attack ourselves. And so one of the big decisions the United States needs to make, just as we made these decisions with nuclear weapons, chemical, biological weapons, and ultimately with drones, is do we want this to be an everyday weapon in our arsenal if it can be used against us in such a devastating way as well?
Right. I remember the debates about the anti-ballistic missile systems decades ago, and people talked about how even though they were defensive weapons, they were scary and destabilizing because it meant if we can knock out our ability to retaliate, it increases the advantage of a first strike. Is something like that at work here?
The exact same debate is at work here. So the North Koreans have certain cyber skills, obviously, against the United States. They did a very successful attack against Sony Corporation. We ran a story the other day about how they managed to steal money from the Bangladeshi central bank using some very innovative cyber means. We don't think they've got the skills to get into the American nuclear arsenal. But let's say for a moment that you took what we're doing with North Korea and you expanded it to go use it against the Russians or the Chinese. And the Russians and the Chinese, of course, see what we're doing with North Korea, and they say, well, of course they'll try to use that against us. They would then be tempted to do the same thing against our own nuclear forces. And that does raise a destabilizing scenario. And the scenario is like this, that right now we've got a balance of power that comes out of mutually assured destruction. No one's going to launch against us because they know we could launch against them. But supposing the opposition group, whether it's Russian or Chinese or someone else, thought, we secretly have gotten inside the American nuclear arsenal, and we could launch against them, and when they go to press a button, nothing will happen, or it won't happen the way they think it will. Then you're increasing the temptation of an adversary to go attempt a first strike. So it's very similar to the debate about anti-missile systems.
We're speaking with David Sanger. He is a national security correspondent for the New York Times. We'll continue our conversation in just a moment. This is Fresh Air.